March 26, 1992, Mike Tyson arrived at the Indiana Youth Center. He was 25 years old. He had just been sentenced to 6 years in prison. Instead of wearing a championship belt, he now had a number, inmate 922335. The intake process was routine. Strip search, medical check, mental health interview, photos, fingerprints. Tyson went through all of it without trouble. Quiet, polite, calm. The guards were expecting something louder, something explosive. Instead, they saw a man who had already lived through much worse. He grew up in Brownsville. He had been locked up as a kid. Juvenile detention, group homes. Being brought into another institution was nothing new to him. He already knew how places like this worked. He knew how to move through them without standing out. So he kept his head down, followed orders, and gave the staff no reason to worry. One officer, a man named Stevens who had worked there for 20 years, pulled Tyson aside during processing and gave him simple advice. Keep your head down. Don't get involved. Don't give anyone a reason. Tyson said he understood and that he could handle himself. Stevens told him that was exactly what worried him. Too much force would bring trouble. Too little would make him a target. You had to find the right balance. Tyson nodded. He understood that game. He had been playing some version of it his whole life. They sent him to DBlock, general population, about 150 inmates. Violent criminals, drug dealers, gang members, all serving serious time. The first time Tyson walked down the hallway, everything stopped. Men pressed themselves against the walls. Some shouted his name. Be excited. Others yelled challenges at him. Tyson kept walking. His face showed nothing. He didn't answer anyone. He wasn't there to impress anybody. He was there to do 6 years and go home. That was when he came face to face with Curtis Morrison. Morrison was known all over DBlock as the top man. He was 6'7", about 300 pounds. A former All-American wrestler from Ohio State. He never made it as a pro athlete. Now he was serving 15 years for armed robbery and assault. For 6 years, nobody had challenged him. Nobody needed to. His size and his readiness to use it had settled every problem before it even started. He had sent men to the hospital. He had broken bones. He had built his position the same way most people do in locked places like this, by using force again and again, until no one wanted to test him anymore. Morrison immediately understood what Tyson's arrival meant. A man more famous than anyone else in the prison. A man with a reputation for violence that even topped his own. A man who, just by being in DBlock, threatened the power Morrison had spent 6 years building. The choice was simple. If Morrison did nothing, his status would slowly fall. If he acted right away, everyone would see it. So he acted. He stood in the middle of the hallway with his arms crossed and said nothing. The guard walking Tyson told him to move. Morrison said he only wanted to look at the new guy. The guard told him again. Morrison didn't move. He stood there like a wall, staring at Tyson from about 10 feet away. Tyson stopped and waited. No anger, no fear, no show, just calm. Well, like someone who had already made up his mind and was simply waiting for things to happen. Finally, Morrison stepped aside. Barely. Just enough space for Tyson to pass. Tyson had to brush against him as he walked by. As Tyson moved down the hallway, Morrison called out after him. "Welcome to DBlock, champ. We'll talk later." Tyson kept walking. He didn't answer. His cellmate was a man named Marcus, short, quiet, locked up on non-violent drug charges, just trying to stay out of trouble and finish his time. Marcus looked up when Tyson came in and said what everyone already knew, that he was Mike Tyson. Tyson simply confirmed it. Marcus told him the whole prison had been talking about his arrival for weeks. Tyson asked if that was going to be a problem. Marcus said not for him personally, but for Tyson? Yes, definitely. The men like Morrison couldn't let something like this slide. His power came from being the most feared man in the building, and that had just changed. Tyson told him to let whatever was going to happen, happen. Marcus disagreed. He said Curtis Morrison wasn't just a big guy who scared people. He was a trained wrestler, an All-American. He knew real technique, and he was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with size. Tyson looked at him and said he knew technique too. Marcus looked at Tyson's face, the complete absence of anxiety on it, and understood that the conversation was essentially over. Tyson wasn't worried, not even slightly. And that realization, Marcus said later, was more unsettling than anything else that had happened that day. The rest of the day passed with a particular kind of tension: orientation, schedule, meal times, work assignments, all the routine mechanics of institutional life. But wherever Tyson went, Morrison was visible, watching from a distance, making his presence felt without doing anything specific. Other inmates tracked it. The anticipation was building the way it builds in any closed system where a confrontation has been signaled, but not yet delivered. It arrived at dinner. The cafeteria held around 200 men. Loud, chaotic, the one part of the day when the different blocks mixed together. Tyson took his tray, some kind of meat, mashed potatoes, vegetables cooked past recognition, and scanned for a place to sit. Morrison was at the center table with his crew, 8 men arranged around him, and he called Tyson over the moment he spotted him. Tyson recognized the geometry of it. Sitting with Morrison was a form of submission, an acknowledgement of hierarchy. Refusing to sit with Morrison was a form of disrespect that would require a response. Either way, he was walking into something. He chose the empty table on the side of the room, away from most of the action, and sat down alone and started eating. Morrison didn't appreciate being ignored. He got up. His crew followed. The cafeteria, which had been running at full volume, went progressively quieter as Morrison crossed the room. By the time he reached Tyson's table and stood over it, most of the conversations had stopped. He asked if Tyson had heard him call out. Tyson said he had. Morrison asked why he hadn't come over. Tyson said he hadn't wanted to. Morrison's expression tightened. He asked if Tyson knew who he was. Tyson told him he did, and that he was about to be the man who walked away. Morrison laughed. His crew laughed on cue. He said balls didn't mean much in this environment. Size was what mattered, and he was twice Tyson's size. Tyson set down his fork and looked up at him. He said size didn't mean anything if you didn't know how to use it. Morrison said he knew how to use it. Tyson told him to use it then, or walk away, but to stop talking. The cafeteria was completely silent. Nobody was eating. Nobody was moving. Morrison's crew was coiled and ready, watching Morrison for a signal. Morrison looked at the guards. They were watching, hands near their radios, ready to move if it broke open. Morrison made a calculation. He named a time and place, the yard the following afternoon. No guards, no interference. Man to man. And Tyson agreed without hesitation. Morrison told him he had better show up. Tyson told him he would be there. Morrison and his crew walked back to their table. The cafeteria slowly returned to something resembling normal, but the only conversation anyone was having was about tomorrow. Marcus sat down next to Tyson after Morrison left. He said Tyson had just agreed to fight a 300-pound former wrestler in the yard with no rules and no referee. Tyson told him that was about right. Marcus said Curtis's crew might jump in. Tyson said they might. Marcus said Tyson could get seriously hurt. Tyson said so could Curtis. Marcus looked at him and stopped arguing. That night, Tyson didn't sleep much, not out of fear. He had been in more dangerous situations than a prison yard fight, and he knew it. But he was thinking through the problem the way he always thought through problems. Prison had its own consequences separate from anything that happened in a ring. If he hurt Morrison badly enough to require serious medical attention, that opened investigations. That meant additional charges. That meant more time. The objective had to be calibrated, enough force to close the question permanently, not so much that it created a new set of problems. He needed Morrison to stay down without putting him in the hospital. Marcus was awake in the bunk above him. He asked if Tyson had worked out a plan. Tyson told him the plan was to hit Morrison until he stopped. Marcus laughed and said that was it. Tyson told him that was all he ever needed. By morning, the story had moved beyond DBlock. The whole prison knew. The guards had extra staff positioned for yard time and riot gear staged and ready. They let it proceed anyway. There are moments in prison management when intervention generates more problems than it resolves, and this was generally understood to be one of them. Sometimes you let inmates settle things. It kept the peace in the long run. Tyson walked into the yard with Marcus. The space was more crowded than usual, men from multiple blocks who had found reasons to be there, all arranged in a loose perimeter, waiting. Morrison was already in the center, shirt removed, his crew around him. He had the size advantage by a significant margin, and he wanted everyone to see it. Tyson walked over in his prison shirt, nothing removed, nothing demonstrated. He was simply ready. They met in the middle. One of Morrison's crew stepped forward and laid out the terms: fight until someone quits or can't continue. No weapons, everything else acceptable. Morrison grinned and asked if Tyson was ready. Tyson said to go ahead. Morrison charged immediately. No warm-up, no preliminary movement, just pure aggression from the opening moment. He shot for a takedown, driving low and fast, faster than most men his size had any right to be. His intention was to get Tyson on the ground, where his wrestling background and weight advantage would be decisive. Tyson sprawled cleanly, hips back, hands pressing down on Morrison's head, denying the takedown completely. Morrison hadn't expected the technique. He adjusted, grabbed for Tyson's legs, trying to trip him instead. Tyson stepped back, pushed Morrison's head down again, and threw a knee into his chest. These are controlled, enough to register. Morrison backed off, breathing harder than he'd expected to be this early. He stared at Tyson with a new kind of attention, They circled. Morrison came in again, this time throwing punches, wide, looping shots built on size and power rather than technique. Tyson slipped the first one, ducked under the second, and stepped inside. At that range, Morrison's reach was worthless. Tyson's left hand landed a short hook to the ribs. His right followed immediately to the body. The sound carried across the yard. Heavy, clean contact. Morrison's face registered pain and something else, a dawning awareness that the situation was different from anything he had previously experienced. He backed up and created distance. He was breathing noticeably harder now. He told Tyson he hit hard. Tyson told him he knew. Morrison charged a third time, trying to use his weight to simply overwhelm, drive into Tyson, smother whatever he was doing, get him to the ground through sheer mass. Tyson timed it precisely. As Morrison came forward, Tyson stepped to the side and threw a short uppercut that caught Morrison squarely on the chin at the peak of his forward momentum. Morrison's head snapped back. His eyes went briefly absent. His legs, carrying all that momentum, kept moving but without direction. He stumbled and went down to his hands and knees, shaking his head, trying to understand where he was. The yard went silent. Morrison had never been dropped. Not in 6 years, not before that. He had absorbed punches from large, dangerous men and kept coming. And here he was on his hands and knees in the prison yard in front of 200 witnesses, trying to locate himself after a single counter from a man who outweighed him by roughly 100 pounds. Tyson stepped back. He gave Morrison space. He didn't follow up, didn't continue while Morrison was on the ground, didn't do the thing that would have put Morrison in the medical unit and Tyson in front of a disciplinary board. He simply waited. Morrison got to his feet, slowly. His pride was damaged in a way that his body wasn't yet, and that was its own kind of pain. He told Tyson that was one good shot, and it wouldn't happen again, and he came forward more carefully this time, trying to actually box, jab, cross, hook, with more structure behind the combinations than he'd shown before. It was better. It didn't matter. Tyson slipped all 3 punches by margins that made Morrison look like he was moving in slow motion. And countered in a sequence that took approximately 2 seconds. Left hook to the body, right cross to the jaw, left uppercut to the chin. 3 punches. Morrison went straight down, not to his knees this time, flat on his back, unconscious before he finished falling. The yard erupted. Men who had been silent for 2 minutes were suddenly screaming. Guards blew whistles and moved in from the perimeter, ordering everyone back to their cells. Morrison's crew rushed to him. He was breathing, starting to come around, a concussion that would take several days to clear, and a jaw that would be sore for longer. The unbeatable Curtis Morrison knocked out cold in the prison yard for the first time in his life by 3 punches from Mike Tyson. Tyson walked back toward the building with Marcus beside him. Marcus was grinning. As he said, Tyson had just become a legend. First day in the facility, knocked out the man who had run DBlock for 6 years and did it in front of everyone. Tyson said he hoped that meant he could do his time in peace. Officer Stevens intercepted them at the door and told Tyson he was going to segregation. Standard procedure after a fight. He said it would depend on what Morrison reported. If Morrison claimed Tyson had been the aggressor, it would be longer. If Morrison told the truth, it would be shorter. Tyson said everyone in the yard had seen what happened. Stevens said he knew, and between them, Stevens said, "Good." Curtis had needed that, but procedure was procedure. Tyson spent 3 days in segregation. Small cell, concrete walls, metal bunk, toilet, sink, nothing else. He didn't find it difficult. He had always been comfortable in his own company, comfortable being alone with his thoughts. In some ways, it was quieter than DBlock. He used the time to think. Morrison woke up with a concussion and a bruised jaw, and to his credit, told the guards the truth. He had initiated it. Tyson had defended himself. Tyson was cleared and returned to DBlock without additional consequence. The corridor was different when he walked back into it. Men moved out of his way without being asked. Nobody called out challenges. The testing had ended definitively because its outcome had been witnessed by everyone, and the result left no room for ambiguity. Tyson stopped at Morrison's cell on his way past. Morrison was sitting on his bunk, moving carefully, favoring his jaw. Tyson asked if he was all right. Morrison said he was sore, but would live. He said he had pushed it because he thought he had to, thought size was enough, thought his wrestling background gave him something to work with. He said he had been wrong on all of it. Tyson told him he was tough, that most men would have stayed down after the first knockdown. Morrison said it hadn't mattered. Tyson was operating at a level he hadn't encountered before and hadn't known existed. Tyson asked if they were good. Morrison thought about it and said yes. He said it was Tyson's house now. Tyson told him it was everyone's house. He just wasn't going to let people test him. That was all it had been. Morrison laughed carefully, holding his jaw, and said the message had been received. Word moved through the facility the way word moves through any closed system, quickly, with embellishments. Visitors took it home to their families. Some versions had Tyson knocking out 10 men. Some had Morrison pulling a weapon. None of that was accurate. The core of it was real enough. Mike Tyson, first day in the Indiana Youth Center, challenged by the largest and most feared inmate in the building. Tyson ended it in the yard the following afternoon with 3 punches. Morrison, who had never been knocked unconscious before, went down and stayed down. The story reached the outside media in diluted form. A brief item noting that Tyson had been involved in a prison altercation and was unharmed. No details, no names. The full account stayed inside the walls where it had happened, circulating through DBlock and beyond, told to new arrivals as part of the unofficial orientation. You know, Mike Tyson did time here. First day. He knocked out Curtis Morrison. 3 punches. Morrison was 300 pounds. Didn't matter. Nobody else tested Tyson for the remainder of his sentence. Morrison became, in an unlikely way, a useful presence. He knew the prison's internal politics in detail, the alliances, the tensions, the unwritten rules that governed daily life in ways the official handbook didn't mention. He shared that knowledge with Tyson. Tyson respected Morrison's experience. They coexisted without animosity, which was more than either of them might have predicted on that first afternoon in the corridor. Tyson was released in March 1995, having served his full sentence. Morrison still had years remaining. They shook hands before Tyson walked out. Morrison told him to take care of himself on the outside. Tyson told him the same. Morrison asked what Tyson was going to do first. Tyson said he was going to fight, going to get his titles back, going to prove he was still the champion. Morrison told him he would be. He said prison hadn't taken that. Tyson said maybe it had changed things. Maybe it had made him better. He said they would see. He walked out. Free. Back into the world that had continued without him for 3 years. Morrison was released in 2001. He gave interviews when he got out, and he was asked about Tyson in essentially every one of them. He told the story consistently. He had challenged Tyson because his position demanded it. He had been running DBlock for 6 years, and then someone arrived whose reputation exceeded his own, and he had felt he had no choice but to respond. He said it was ego. He said it was pride. And he said it was the stupidest decision he had ever made, and also the most instructive. He said that Tyson had dropped him with 3 punches and made it look effortless, and that the experience had dismantled something in him, a belief he had carried for years that his size made him genuinely dangerous against anyone. Tyson had answered that question in about 40 seconds of actual fighting. He said the experience had humbled him, made him better, taught him that there is always someone operating at a level beyond your own, and that the intelligent response to that reality is not a challenge, but an acknowledgement. He said he had learned that from Mike Tyson, and he had learned it the most direct way possible. Asked if he regretted it, Morrison said both yes and no. Yes. Not them because it hurt, and it was unnecessary, and he had brought it entirely on himself. No, because the lesson it had delivered was worth the cost, and he wasn't sure he would have absorbed it any other way. Asked if he would do it again, Morrison said no. He had learned his lesson the first time, and some lessons only needed teaching once. Years later, in 2020, Tyson was recording his podcast when a guest asked him about prison, about the first day specifically. Tyson described Morrison, the size, the wrestling background, the corridor moment, the cafeteria confrontation, and explained what had happened in the yard the following afternoon. Body shot, cross, uppercut, 3 punches. Morrison went down and didn't get up. The guest asked how big Morrison was. Tyson said 6'7", 300 pounds, former college wrestler. He could have competed at heavyweight, all muscle. But size without skill, Tyson said, was just weight. The guest asked if Tyson had held back. Tyson said yes. He could have done more damage. He hadn't needed to. The point had been made with 3 punches, and there was no reason to extend it beyond that. He said the outcome had made things easier for both of them. Morrison no longer had to defend his position every day. Tyson no longer had to prove anything to anyone. They both just served their time. He said he didn't feel bad about it. Morrison had known what he was doing when he issued the challenge. Everyone in that corridor in that cafeteria had known. The yard fight was the logical conclusion of a sequence Morrison had started, and it ended the only way it was ever going to end. The podcast clip circulated. Millions of views. And the comment sections filled up with people responding to the specifics. 3 punches on a 300-pound wrestler, a man who had never been knocked out before, Iron Mike Tyson doing it on his first full day in a federal facility. Morrison saw the clip. He was in his mid-50s by then, living quietly, long past the events being described. He left a comment confirming it. He said Tyson was telling the truth, that he had been the man on the receiving end of those 3 punches, and that it was the best thing that had ever happened to him inside those walls. He said it had taught him humility. He said it had taught him respect. He thanked Tyson for it. The comment generated thousands of responses. People asked Morrison to tell the full story in a longer format. He did, an extended post in which he walked through everything. The challenge, the cafeteria confrontation, the yard, the knockout, the 3 days he spent in the medical unit afterward, the conversation with Tyson when Tyson returned from segregation, the years of coexistence that followed. He wrote that Tyson could have kept hitting when he was down, could have done lasting damage. He didn't. He stopped when the fight was over, and Morrison said that restraint was its own kind of power. Knowing when to stop was as important as knowing how to fight, and watching Tyson exercise that restraint while standing over an unconscious man had stayed with him for decades. Someone asked if he would fight Tyson again given the chance. Morrison's answer was short. He said no. He had learned his lesson the first time, and some lessons only needed to be taught once. Mike Tyson was the real thing. You didn't test that. You recognized it. That is the account of what happened on March 26, 1992, at the Indiana Youth Center. Mike Tyson arrived as inmate 922335 and within 24 hours had been challenged by the most feared man in the facility. He waited. He stayed calm. He accepted the terms when they were set. He showed up to the yard the following afternoon and ended the confrontation in seconds with 3 precisely placed punches. Curtis Morrison, who had never been knocked unconscious before that afternoon and had spent 6 years building a position of dominance through size and force, went down in front of 200 witnesses and didn't get up. Nobody else challenged Tyson for the remaining years of his sentence. He served his time. He was released. And he went back to fighting and reclaimed what had been taken from him while he was inside. Morrison served his remaining years, was released in 2001, and spent the rest of his life being asked about the afternoon Mike Tyson knocked him out in a prison yard with 3 punches. He answered honestly every time he was asked. He said it was the most important thing that had happened to him in those 15 years, not the hardest. The most important. The story became part of the unofficial record of the Indiana Youth Center, told to new arrivals, passed down through successive generations of inmates who had never been there when it happened, but knew it the way people know things that have passed into institutional memory. Mike Tyson was here. First day, someone tested him. 3 punches. That was it. The baddest man on the planet in a ring was the same man in a prison yard. The environment didn't change what he was. Nothing changed what he was. And the men who understood that early enough left him alone. The one man who needed a demonstration got one he carried with him for the rest of his life. 3 punches. That was all it took. That was all it ever took when you were Mike Tyson.